The refugee ship Wandering Hope shuddered as another engine failed. Commander Jiwon gripped the metal railing and watched the warning lights flash red across the bridge. His people had been running for 3 years now, moving from one empty system to another like ghosts in the dark. "Sir, that was our last backup engine," reported Lieutenant Minho from his station. The young officer looked tired. "They all look tired these days. We can keep flying for maybe 2 more months." Jiwon nodded slowly. Around him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their posts. Nobody complained anymore. What was the point? Every species in the galaxy had turned them away. The Kethori were poisoned now, unwanted and unwelcome wherever they went. Through the main window, Jiwon could see the other ships in their small fleet. 4 to 7 vessels carrying the last 50,000 of his kind. Once, the Kethori had numbered in the billions. They had been the galaxy's greatest terraformers, turning dead rocks into garden worlds. Other species had begged for their help. That was before the madness. Jiwon closed his eyes and tried not to remember. 200 years ago, a group of Kethori scientists had lost their minds. They thought they could make other species better by changing their genes without asking. They had experimented on thousands of people from different worlds. The results were horrible. Most of the test subjects died. The ones who lived were changed into something that was no longer themselves. The galaxy had been right to stop them. But the galaxy had also decided that all Kethori were dangerous. Every single one of them. Even the children who had not been born yet. "Commander," called out Navigator Summon from her station. "We're getting another message from the Altrian fleet." Jiwon sighed. "Put it through." The hologram of Admiral Vex appeared in the center of the bridge. The tall, blue-skinned Altrian looked disgusted. "Kethori vessel, you have 20 minutes to leave our space. We will not warn you again." "Admiral, please," Jiwon said. "We have children on these ships. Sick people. We just need supplies and dash. You should have thought about your children before your kind tried to poison the galaxy." Vex cut him off. 20 minutes, gene thieves. After that, we start shooting." The hologram disappeared. Jiwon felt his shoulders sag. Gene thieves. That was what everyone called them now. Not terraformers. Not survivors. Just thieves who stole genes. "Set course for the next system," he ordered quietly. "Sir," Minho said carefully. "That's the Terra system. The humans live there." Jiwon had heard of humans. A young species that had just discovered faster than light travel. The Galactic Council barely acknowledged them. Most aliens thought humans were too primitive to matter. "They're our only option," Jiwon said. "Maybe they won't know enough about us to be afraid." As the ships turned toward the distant yellow star, Jiwon walked through the corridors of his vessel. He passed families huddled in small rooms, sharing their last food rations. He saw children playing with broken toys while their parents whispered worries they thought the little ones could not hear. In the medical bay, Dr. Kyungmin worked over an elderly woman. The old Kethori was dying from a disease that could be easily cured with proper medicine. Medicine they did not have because no one would trade with them. "How long does she have?" Jiwon asked quietly. "Maybe a week," Kyungmin replied without looking up. "She's the 3rd one this month. If we don't find help soon." He did not need to finish. They both knew what would happen. The Kethori had survived the galaxy's hatred for 3 years, but they could not survive forever on failing ships with no supplies. Jiwon continued his walk, past the workshops where engineers tried to fix broken equipment with spare parts from other broken equipment. Past the schoolrooms where teachers told children about the beautiful worlds their grandparents had once called home. Past the memorial wall where they had carved the names of everyone who had died during their long exile. So many names. So many lost. Back on the bridge, the crew watched the stars slowly shift as they traveled toward the human system. Nobody talked much. They had learned not to hope too much. Hope hurt when it was crushed over and over again. 3 days to the human system, Navigator Summon reported. 3 days. 3 days to find out if there was any kindness left in the galaxy, or if the Kethori would finally die among the stars like the rest of the universe wanted. Jiwon looked at his reflection in the dark window. His skin had the pale blue color of his people, and his large eyes could see in almost no light. To most aliens, these differences made him look dangerous. A gene thief who might steal their children and change them into monsters. But inside, he was just tired. Tired of running. Tired of watching his people slowly fade away. Tired of carrying the guilt for crimes he had never committed. Soon they would know if the humans were different. Or if they were just like everyone else in the cold, empty galaxy. Captain Hannah sat in the pilot seat of the small diplomatic ship Peaceseeker. Her hands shook slightly as she checked the communication systems one more time. Behind her, the massive Kethori refugee fleet waited in the darkness beyond the human solar system. "Are you ready, Captain?" asked her co-pilot, Lieutenant J1. He was young for a diplomat, barely 30 years old. But he was one of the few who still believed they might find help somewhere. "As ready as I can be," Hannah replied. She had done this same thing 4 to 7 times before. 4 to 7 different species had rejected them. Most had been polite about it. Some had threatened to shoot them. All had said no. The Peace Seeker moved slowly toward the human space stations orbiting their blue-green planet. Hannah could see the primitive design of their ships. Humans had only been traveling in space for a few decades. Their technology was simple compared to the great galactic civilizations. Maybe that was good. Maybe they would not know enough to be afraid. "Human vessels, this is Captain Hannah of the Kethori diplomatic ship," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We request permission to speak with your leaders." The wait felt like hours. J1 drummed his fingers nervously on his console. Through the window, they could see human ships moving to surround them. Small fighters with weapons that looked like toys compared to real military ships. Finally, a voice answered. It sounded strange, speaking Galactic Standard with an unfamiliar accent. "Kethori vessel, this is Admiral Dong-1 of the Earth Defense Force. We've been expecting you." Hannah blinked in surprise. "Expecting us?" "News travels fast, even to the edge of the galaxy. We know what happened to your people. Please, come aboard our station. We'll provide food and rest while you tell us your story." J1 stared at his captain with wide eyes. Food and rest? No species had offered them basic hospitality in 3 years. Most would not even let them stop to repair their ships. "Admiral," Hannah said carefully, "you understand that the Galactic Council has declared us dangerous? Any species that helps us will face punishment." There was a pause. Then Admiral Dong-1 laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but one filled with genuine humor. "Captain, my species fought 2 world wars and nearly destroyed our own planet before we learned to work together. We're not afraid of the Council's opinion." An hour later, Hannah found herself sitting in a comfortable chair in the human command station. The walls were decorated with pictures of Earth, blue oceans, green forests, and mountains covered in white snow. She had not seen natural beauty like this in years. Admiral Dong-1 was a middle-aged human with kind eyes and gray hair. He listened quietly as Hannah told the story of her people. The experiments that had gone wrong 2 centuries ago. The punishment that had followed. The exile that had lasted for generations. "So you see," Hannah finished, "we are guilty of the crimes of our ancestors. The galaxy has judged us all for what a few scientists did long ago." Dong-1 was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Captain, let me tell you about humans. We have a saying, the sins of the father should not be visited upon the son. A child is not responsible for their parents' mistakes." "The Council does not see it that way," Hannah said quietly. "The Council can take their rules and shove them into a black hole," Dong-1 said bluntly. Hannah gasped at his casual dismissal of the galaxy's most powerful organization. "We've been watching what happens to species who don't fit their perfect little boxes. The cybernetic Nexori, hunted for improving themselves with machines. The hive-minded resonance, feared for thinking together instead of alone. Your people, punished for the actions of madmen who died before most of your refugees were even born." He turned back to face her. "Humanity believes in second chances, Captain. We believe in judging people by their own actions, not the actions of their ancestors." That evening, Hannah watched in amazement as the human leaders held an emergency session. She expected hours of debate, political arguments, and careful consideration of the risks. Instead, the vote took less than 20 minutes. President Kyungmin, a young woman who reminded Hannah of her own daughter, stood before the assembly. "The question before us is simple. Do we help people in need, or do we turn away because others tell us to be afraid? I vote to open Earth's doors to the Kethori refugees." The final count was overwhelming. Out of 300 representatives, only 12 voted against providing sanctuary. As Hannah transmitted the news back to Commander Jiwon and the refugee fleet, tears ran down her face. For the first time in 3 years, they were wanted somewhere. For the first time since the exile began, someone had looked at the Kethori and seen people instead of criminals. "Welcome to the Sol system," Admiral Dong-1 said as he watched the refugee ships slowly enter human space. "Welcome home." Behind them, automated systems were already sending messages to the Galactic Council, informing them of humanity's decision. The responses would not be friendly. Trade sanctions would follow. Threats would come. Other species would pressure Earth to change its mind. But watching the first Kethori children step off their ships onto human stations, seeing their faces light up with wonder and hope, Admiral Dongwon knew his species had made the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone against the galaxy. Sometimes the outcasts found each other. Dr. Summon stood on the observation deck of Mars Station and watched the red planet slowly change color. Where once there had been only rust-colored dust and rock, now patches of green appeared like miracle spots across the landscape. The terraforming project was moving faster than anyone had dreamed possible. "The atmospheric processes are working perfectly," said Engineer J1, joining her at the window. He held a data tablet showing numbers that made both of them smile. "At this rate, Mars will have breathable air in 5 years instead of 50. Summon nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. "Your people learn so quickly, J1. Most species take centuries to understand terraforming technology. Humans master it in months." Below them, they could see human and Kethori workers laboring together in the biodomes. Children from both species played in the artificial gardens, their laughter echoing through the transparent walls. It was a sight that would have been impossible anywhere else in the galaxy. "Dr. Summon," J1 said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why are you really helping us? I mean, your people have skills we desperately need. You could have demanded anything in exchange for your knowledge. Instead, you just give it freely." Summon was quiet for a moment, remembering the first day the refugee ships had arrived. The human officials had not asked what the Kethori could offer in return for sanctuary. They had simply opened their doors and said, "How can we help?" "Because your species sees us as people," she said finally. "Not as walking weapons or genetic thieves. Just people who need a home." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Hyun Woo from the Earth Defense Force. His face was grim as he approached them with a secure communication device. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but we have a problem." The holographic display showed shipping routes throughout human space. Red marks indicated trade vessels that had been turned away from alien ports. Yellow symbols showed diplomatic communications that had been ignored. Orange warnings highlighted defense platforms that were being built at the edge of human territory. "The Galactic Council's sanctions are getting worse," Hyun Woo explained. "No alien species will trade with us anymore. They're cutting off our access to medical supplies, rare metals, advanced computer systems. Everything we need to keep our colonies running." J1 stared at the display. "How long can we last?" "Maybe 6 months before the outer colonies start having serious problems. A year before Earth itself feels the impact." Dr. Summon felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. The guilt that every Kethori carried. Once again, her people were causing problems for those who tried to help them. "This is our fault," she said quietly. "We've brought this on your species. Maybe we should leave before." "No." J1's voice was sharp. "Don't even think about it. We made our choice with open eyes. We knew there would be consequences. But your people will suffer because of us." "Our people are already benefiting because of you," Hyun Woo said, pointing to the green patches on Mars visible through the window. "Look what we've accomplished together in just 6 months. Our colonies are growing faster than ever before. Our agriculture is more efficient. Our understanding of genetics and biology has advanced by decades." It was true. The partnership between humans and Kethori had produced amazing results. Human curiosity and adaptability combined with Kethori knowledge and experience had created innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. But the cost was getting higher every day. "Commander," Dr. Summon said, "there's something you need to know. Our intelligence networks are picking up unusual military movements. The Council isn't just planning to isolate humanity. They're considering more direct action." Heinwa's expression darkened. "What kind of direct action?" "The kind that involves battleships," Summon replied grimly. Later that evening, the three of them sat in J1's small apartment on Mars Station, sharing a meal of Earth rice and Kethori vegetable proteins. Outside the windows, 2 moons hung in the salmon-colored sky while the lights of human Kethori settlements twinkled across the planet's surface. "My daughter asked me something yesterday," J1 said as they ate. "She wanted to know why the other aliens don't like her Kethori friends. I didn't know what to tell her." "What did you say?" Summon asked. "I told her that sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. But that fear doesn't make the things bad, just different." Dr. Summon smiled sadly. "Your daughter is wiser than most of the galaxy." She's growing up in a world where differences are celebrated instead of feared, Hyunwoo observed. That's something worth fighting for. As if summoned by his words, an emergency alert sounded through the station. Red lights flashed as the communication system crackled to life. All personnel, this is Admiral Dongwon. Long-range sensors have detected a large fleet moving toward the outer edge of our system. Council ships. Lots of them. All citizens are advised to prepare for possible military action. The three friends looked at each other across the dinner table. They had known this day would come. The galaxy had decided that humanity's experiment in acceptance had gone too far. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the Martian sky. Soon, those stars would be filled with ships carrying weapons and threats and demands for the surrender of the Kethori refugees. But inside the station, human and Kethori families continued to share their evening meals, their children played together in the corridors, and their scientists worked side by side on projects that could benefit all of civilization. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. Lieutenant Sunwoo floated in the cockpit of his fighter ship, watching the massive council fleet emerge from hyperspace like angry metal wasps. 312 warships, including the enormous dreadnought Purity's Edge that was twice the size of anything humanity had ever built. Sunwoo, you seeing this? Came the voice of his wingman through the radio. How are we supposed to fight that? Sunwoo touched the small crystal device attached to his helmet. It was a Kethori biointerface, something that would have been forbidden on any other world in the galaxy. But here, human and Kethori volunteers had worked together to create something new. We don't fight it head-on, Sunwoo replied, feeling his enhanced senses expand through the crystal connection. Suddenly he could perceive the magnetic fields around the asteroids, the gravity wells of nearby planets, the tiny variations in space dust that normal senses would miss. We fight smart. On the bridge of the Earth Defense Station, Admiral Dongwon faced the holographic image of Admiral Kian, the Council's enforcement leader. The alien looked like a tall gray tree with too many arms, and his voice carried the cold authority of someone who had never been told no. Humans of Earth, Admiral Kian announced, you have violated galactic law by harboring genetic criminals. Surrender the Kethori refugees immediately, and your species will face only minor punishment. Dongwon looked around the bridge at his mixed crew of humans and Kethori officers working side by side. Behind him stood Captain Hannah, who had become his closest advisor over the past months. Admiral Kian, Dongwon replied calmly, we've reviewed galactic law pretty carefully. Nowhere does it say we can't offer sanctuary to refugees. Earth stands with the innocent. The Kethori are not innocent. Kian's voice rose in anger. They are gene thieves who poison everything they touch. The only poison I see here, Dongwon said, is the hatred you're spreading across the galaxy. If you want the Kethori, you'll have to go through us. The Council fleet moved into attack formation. Their ships were sleek and powerful, armed with weapons that could crack planets. The human defense force looked like toy boats facing a hurricane. But in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, something unexpected was happening. Captain Yuna led her squad of hybrid marines through the zero gravity between the rocks, moving with impossible grace. Half her team were humans who had volunteered for the Kethori enhancement program. The other half were young Kethori who had grown up learning human tactics. Remember, she whispered into her radio, they expect us to fight like a normal military. They're not ready for what we've become. Her enhanced vision could see heat signatures through solid rock. Her improved reflexes let her change direction instantly without losing momentum. Most importantly, her hybrid team thought and moved as one unit, sharing information through bioneural links that the Council had banned as unnatural. The first wave of Council fighters entered the asteroid field expecting easy targets. Instead, they found themselves flying into a three-dimensional maze where the rocks themselves seemed alive. Sunwoo's fighter darted between asteroids that were spinning and tumbling in patterns that should have been impossible to predict. But through his Kethori interface, he could feel the gravitational forces like a musician feeling rhythm. He led his squadron in a deadly dance, appearing behind enemy fighters and vanishing again before they could respond. How are they doing that? Came a panicked voice over the Council communication channels. The asteroids are moving. They were moving. Captain Yuna's Marines had placed gravity manipulators throughout the belt, devices that the Kethori had originally designed for terraforming. Now they turned the rocks into weapons, sending house-sized asteroids spinning toward Council ships with perfect timing. Admiral Kian watched in growing disbelief as his superior fleet was picked apart by impossible tactics. Human fighters moved through space like they could see the future. Human marines appeared inside his ships through passages too small for normal soldiers to use. Every time his forces tried to adapt to one strange tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we're losing ships faster than we're destroying theirs. This is impossible. They're using our own physics against us." In space above Earth, Commander Jiwon piloted a Kethori refugee ship that had been converted into a medical vessel. As damaged human fighters limped back from battle, his people worked alongside human doctors to save lives. Kethori healing techniques that could regrow lost limbs were combined with human surgical skills to perform miracles. "Commander," called Dr. Kyungmin from the medical bay, "we have incoming wounded from the asteroid belt. It's Lieutenant Sun Woo." His ship took a direct hit. Jiwon felt his heart skip. Sun Woo had become like a son to him over the past months. The young human pilot had volunteered for one of the most dangerous enhancement programs, risking his life to defend people he barely knew. When they pulled Sun Woo from his damaged fighter, half his body was burned and broken. But his eyes were still bright with determination. "Did we stop them?" he whispered. Through the medical bay windows, they could see the remnants of the Council fleet retreating toward the edge of the solar system. Over half their ships were destroyed or too damaged to fight. The rest were fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. "Yes," Jiwon said quietly, holding the young pilot's hand. "We stopped them." For the first time in galactic history, a Council enforcement fleet had been defeated by a species they considered primitive. Word would spread to every corner of the galaxy. Earth had stood against the impossible and won. President Kyungmin stood before the massive viewing window in New Geneva Station, watching ships from 17 different species dock at the growing orbital platform. 6 months had passed since Earth's victory over the Council fleet, and the galaxy was changing in ways no one had expected. "Madam President," called her aide, Minister Sumin, who had become Earth's first alien cabinet member. "The Nexari delegation has arrived. They are requesting immediate asylum." Through the window, Kyungmin could see the Nexari ships. They looked like floating metal cities, their hulls covered in blinking lights and mechanical appendages. The Council had hunted the Nexari for decades, calling them machine-infected because they chose to improve their bodies with cybernetic parts. "How many refugees?" Kyungmin asked. 2 million, Somin replied. "Their homeworld fell to Council forces last week. They're the last of their kind. 2 million beings who needed shelter, food, and hope. It should have been an impossible burden for humanity's young civilization. But these days, impossible seemed to be what humans did best." In the workshops of Europa Station, Engineer J1 worked alongside beings that would have given Council members nightmares. A Nexari technician with 6 mechanical arms helped him design new ship engines. A crystalline resonant, part of a hive mind species that thought as one, provided mathematical calculations that no individual mind could handle alone. "The power conversion rate is still too low," J1 said, studying the holographic display of their latest design. The resonance crystal body pulsed with soft light as it communicated with its distant siblings. "Our collective suggests modifying the plasma flow through the 7th iteration matrix. This approach increases efficiency by 37%. J1 grinned. Working with species that the galaxy had labeled as dangerous or unnatural, had taught him more about engineering in 6 months than he had learned in his entire education. "Let's try it," he said. Meanwhile, on Mars, Lieutenant Sun Woo walked through the rehabilitation gardens with his new prosthetic arm. The limb was a masterwork of Nexari cybernetics and Kethori biological engineering, stronger and more sensitive than his original arm had ever been. Beside him walked Yuki, a young Kethori girl who had been born during the refugee flight. She had never seen a natural world until Mars, and every flower and tree filled her with wonder. "Uncle Sun Woo," she said, using the title that Kethori children gave to trusted adults, "why do the Council people hate us so much?" Sun Woo thought carefully before answering. "They're afraid, Yuki. They think there's only one right way to be alive. When they see people like your family or the Nexari or the Resonance, they see difference. And difference scares them." "But difference is good," Yuki said, confused. "My friend Haruto is human, and he thinks differently than me. That's why we can solve problems better together." "Exactly," Sun Woo said, ruffling her hair. "You understand something that took the galaxy thousands of years to forget. The changes were not just happening on human worlds. Across the galaxy, species that had been oppressed by the Council were finding their courage. On the industrial world of Kepler 442, the worker species had revolted against their Council-appointed overlords. In the Vega system, 3 different species had declared independence and formed their own alliance. Admiral Dawn 1 received daily reports of the growing chaos in Council space. Rebellions were breaking out on dozens of worlds. Trade routes were collapsing as species refused to follow Council regulations. The rigid order that had controlled the galaxy for centuries was cracking like ice in spring. "Sir," reported Commander Hyun Woo from the tactical station, "we're getting another request for military assistance. The Tau Ceti rebels are asking for weapon shipments." Dawn 1 shook his head. "We're not in the business of starting wars, Commander. But we can send them something better than weapons." "Sir." "Send them teachers. Engineers. Doctors. People who can help them build something better than what they're tearing down." In the deepest levels of New Harmony Station, the galaxy's first Diversity Institute had become something unprecedented, a place where any species could come to learn and share knowledge freely. Dr. Summon worked with researchers from 43 different worlds, studying everything from new forms of mathematics to revolutionary medical techniques. "The preliminary results are fascinating," she told President Kyungmin during their weekly meeting. "When species work together voluntarily, the innovation rate increases exponentially. The Council's segregation policies weren't just cruel, they were scientifically wasteful." But the greatest change was visible in the children. Human kids played with young Kethori in the gardens of Mars. Nexary adolescents raced through the zero-gravity sports complexes alongside human teenagers. Resonant hatchlings shared their hive mind experiences with fascinated youngsters from a dozen different species. They were growing up in a galaxy where difference was celebrated, where cooperation was normal, and where the idea that one species was better than another seemed ridiculous. Commander Jiwon, now an admiral in the Earth Defense Force, stood on the bridge of the starship New Beginning and watched the latest group of refugees dock with the station. These were Zephyrites, a peaceful species that communicated through color changes in their skin. The Council had declared them primitive, and tried to force them into re-education camps. "Welcome to Earth space," Jiwon said to their leader through the translation device. "Welcome home." Behind him, his mixed crew of humans, Kethori, Nexary, and Resonance worked together with the easy cooperation that had become normal in the growing alliance. They no longer called themselves separate species working together. They were becoming something new entirely. The galaxy was changing. The old rules were breaking. And in the space around a small blue world, the future was being born one refugee ship at a time.